My son's betrayal echoed louder than strangers. She gave him life, love, and everything she owned, yet when betrayal came, it wasn't from the world outside but from the very child she raised. This story dives into the most painful kind of betrayal, when blood turns against blood. When strangers betrayed me, I found the strength to endure. But when my own son, the one I carried, fed, and loved, turned his back on me, the wound cut deeper than any knife. This is not just a tale of family, but of shattered trust, broken pride, and the haunting truth that sometimes the loudest betrayals come from those we love most. Across 5 powerful chapters, you'll walk through love, lies, shame, and redemption, in a way that will leave you breathless. The sacrifice of a mother. Carolyn Reed often told herself that motherhood was not a choice, it was a vow. A vow sealed the moment her son's tiny fingers curled around hers in the dimly lit delivery room of Cleveland Mercy Hospital, nearly 22 years ago. That vow had carried her through storms of loneliness, nights of hunger, and years of exhaustion that would have broken another woman. She had been only 24 when Ethan came into her life. His father, Mark Reed, had been the kind of man whose smile was too easy, whose promises were too sweet, and whose love was as fleeting as summer rain. Mark had kissed her forehead the night Ethan was born and whispered, "Don't worry, Carol, we'll raise him together. You'll never be alone." 3 years later, Mark was gonna vanish like smoke, leaving behind nothing but unpaid bills and a woman who had no choice but to fight like hell for the son she loved. Carolyn remembered those early years with painful clarity. The old 2-bedroom house on Ashwood Lane had been falling apart even when they moved in. The roof leaked when it rained, the heater clanked in the winter, and the wallpaper peeled off in jagged strips. Still, Caroline scrubbed and patched, painted and repaired, all while Ethan toddled around in handmade down clothes she bought from thrift stores. Every dollar mattered. Every shift counted. She worked at the diner in the mornings, took on cleaning jobs in the afternoons, and sometimes stayed up past midnight sewing clothes for extra cash. Sleep was a luxury she rarely afforded herself, but none of it mattered when she came home to Ethan's laughter. None of it mattered when she held him close, his head resting against her chest, and he whispered, "Love you, Mama." It was in those moments that she felt she could withstand anything. By the time Ethan turned 10, Caroline had built a rhythm of survival. Each birthday was celebrated with homemade cakes and dollar store candles. Each Christmas was pieced together with clearance toys she bought months in advance. And each summer, she saved enough for a small road trip, a cheap motel near Lake Erie, where they would sit on the sand, eating peanut butter sandwiches and pretending the world wasn't pressing down on them. Ethan had always been her shadow. He followed her everywhere, his small hands tugging at her apron strings while she cooked, his eyes glowing when she tucked him in at night with stories she half invented and half remembered from her own childhood. "Mama," he once said, at 7 years old, while curled in bed with his blanket pulled to his chin, "I'm gonna buy you a big house one day, one with a pool, and I'll never let you work so hard again." Caroline kissed his forehead and laughed softly, though tears stung her eyes. "I don't need a big house, baby. I just need you." She meant it, every word, but sacrifice has a way of carving deep scars, even when hidden under smiles. Caroline missed out on so much of life: friends, romance, her own dreams. While other women her age found love again or pursued careers, she measured her days by shifts and paychecks. She couldn't risk another relationship. Every ounce of her strength was reserved for Ethan. At night, when the house was quiet, she sometimes lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling, asking herself, "Will it be enough? Will he understand one day how much I gave? Or will he only see what I couldn't give?" Still, she silenced those fears with the rhythm of work, because mothers don't have the luxury of doubt. By Ethan's middle school years, things grew harder. He was clever, sharp-witted, and charming, traits inherited from his father. But unlike Mark, Ethan had a core of determination that Caroline had tried to instill in him. She believed he was destined for more than she ever had. But kids are cruel, and poverty leaves marks. Carolyn remembered the first time Ethan came home crying after school. He was 12, his backpack thrown on the floor, his fists clenched. "They laughed at me, Mom," he muttered, his voice breaking. "Said, my shoes are old. Said you work at a diner. Said we're trash." Caroline pulled him into her arms, holding him tightly. "Ethan, listen to me. You are not trash. You are worth more than those kids will ever know. We may not have money, but we have each other. And that's something no one can take away." He nodded, but she could feel the way his small body trembled. That was the night she stayed up late, stitching patches into his sneakers to make them last a little longer. She cried into the fabric, whispering prayers that one day he would see beyond what they lacked. The teenage years arrived like a storm. At 14, Ethan grew restless. He began to pull away from Caroline, embarrassed by her presence at school events. When she showed up in her faded diner uniform to watch his basketball games, she noticed the way he avoided her gaze, the way he laughed too loudly with his friends, pretending not to see her wave. Caroline tried not to take it personally, but each rejection left her a little more hollow. She reminded herself, it's just adolescence. He'll grow out of it. He's still my boy. But the distance grew. He stopped talking to her about his day. He rolled his eyes at her warnings. And sometimes, when his voice was sharp and cruel, Caroline saw shades of Mark that made her heart sink. Yet, even then, she sacrificed. She took on extra shifts so Ethan could have a new pair of Nikes for prom. She skipped meals so he could afford the expensive SAT prep courses. She sold her mother's old locket, her most precious heirloom, to buy him a laptop for college applications. And when Ethan finally got accepted into a prestigious university, Caroline wept tears of pride. All the years of sacrifice, all the penet, had led to this moment. Her son was going to rise above. She believed, deep in her soul, that Ethan would remember her sacrifices, that one day, he would say, "Mama, you gave me everything. Now it's my turn to take care of you." But life has a cruel way of twisting expectations. And Caroline was about to learn that sometimes, the people you love most can cut the deepest wounds. The distance grows. The first sign that Ethan was slipping away came in small, almost invisible shifts. At first, it was the way he stopped telling Caroline about his day. She used to hear every detail: what teacher gave too much homework, what friend got into trouble, what girl he thought was pretty. By 14, those stories had dried up. She would ask, "How was school, honey?" And he would shrug, mumble, "Fine," before disappearing into his room with the door shut tight. Caroline told herself it was normal. Teenagers need space, she reasoned. He's just growing up. But deep inside, she felt the chill of distance creeping into their home. The walls of their little house on Ashwood Lane seemed to echo with silence now. Dinner, once filled with laughter and chatter, became a battlefield of one-word answers. Caroline cooked his favorite meals: meatloaf, mashed potatoes, fried chicken, but Ethan picked at his food, scrolling through his phone, barely looking at her. One evening, she tried to bridge the gap. "Ethan, your English teacher called. She said you have real talent for writing. Did you know your essay was read out loud in class?" Ethan shrugged without looking up. "It's whatever." Caroline forced a smile. "It's not whatever, it's amazing. You've always had such a way with words. Maybe one day you'll..." "Mom, stop." His voice was sharp, cutting her off. "You don't get it. Nobody cares about writing. It's lame." The sting of his words settled into her chest. She bit her lip, nodding quietly. But when he left the table, she sat staring at his untouched plate, whispering to herself, "He doesn't mean it. He's just a teenager." At school, Ethan began to blend in with a new crowd. They were boys from wealthier families, the kind who drove hand-me-down cars at 16, wore designer sneakers, and never worried about money for field trips. Caroline noticed how Ethan's eyes lit up when they talked about vacations in Florida, or how their parents bought them the newest iPhones. One afternoon, she overheard him on the phone. "Yeah, man, I'll be there." "Nah, I'll tell her I'm studying at the library." You know how she is, always nagging. The word hit her harder than a slap. Nagging. Was that what he thought of her now? She leaned against the kitchen counter, listening as he laughed with his friends, weaving lies about where he was going. Tears blurred her eyes. But she didn't confront him, not yet. The shame started to creep in for Ethan. At his basketball games, Caroline still showed up faithfully, cheering louder than anyone else in the bleachers. She wore her diner uniform, sometimes her hair pulled back in a messy bun after a 12-hour shift. When Ethan glanced at her, his face tightened, and he quickly turned away. One night after a game, Caroline rushed down to hug him, her smile wide with pride. "Ethan, you were incredible tonight. That three-pointer, my God." "You mom, stop," he hissed, pulling away from her embrace. His teammates snickered nearby, and Ethan's cheeks burned red. "You don't have to yell like that. It's embarrassing." The words pierced her like knives. She froze, hands falling to her sides, while Ethan stormed off with his friends. leaving her standing alone under the harsh gym lights. She drove home that night in silence, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. The memory of his childhood voice echoed in her head. "Love you, Mama." When had that sweet boy turned into this cold stranger? By 16, Ethan's world was no longer hers. He asked for money constantly, for gas, for clothes, for outings with friends. Caroline gave what she could, often skipping her own needs to fill his. But when she couldn't give enough, his tone grew resentful. "Other kids don't have to deal with this," he snapped once, slamming the refrigerator shut. "Their parents actually support them. You don't get it." Caroline's chest tightened. "Ethan, I am supporting you. I'm doing everything I can. Don't you see that? Working at some greasy diner isn't enough." His words were sharp, venomous. "You'll never understand what it's like to actually want something better." Caroline staggered back, as though struck. She wanted to scream, to tell him how many nights she'd gone hungry so he could eat, how many dreams she'd buried so he could have a future. But the words caught in her throat. Instead, she whispered, "I only ever wanted better for you." He didn't answer. He walked away. The distance grew into a canyon dot. By senior year, Ethan had all but stopped coming home after school. He claimed he was at the library or at practice. But Caroline noticed the smell of cologne on his clothes, the late-night texts flashing on his phone, the unfamiliar numbers calling at odd hours. Once, she stayed up waiting for him until 2 a.m., pacing the living room in her robe. When he finally stumbled in, she confronted him. "Ethan, where have you been? Do you know what time it is?" "I was worried sick." He rolled his eyes, tossing his jacket on the couch. "Relax, Mom. I'm not a kid anymore. You're 17. You're still under my roof. You can't just disappear like this. God, you're so controlling." His voice dripped with disdain. "No wonder Dad left." The words exploded in the room like a bomb. Caroline froze. Her breath caught in her chest. He had never used his father as a weapon before. Her lips trembled. "Ethan, don't you dare." But he had already retreated to his room, slamming the door shut behind him, leaving her standing in the living room, shaking with silent sobs. Despite everything, Caroline kept sacrificing. She worked overtime to pay for his prom tuxedo. Even though her feet ached so badly she could barely stand, she sold her wedding ring, one of the last remnants of Mark, to help Ethan pay his college deposit at his graduation. Caroline sat in the crowd, clutching the program with tears streaming down her face. When Ethan walked across the stage to receive his diploma, her heart swelled with pride. She clapped until her hands stung, ignoring the way he barely glanced her way. After the ceremony, she rushed to hug him. "Ethan, I'm so proud of you. You did it, baby." He stiffened in her arms, giving her a polite half-smile. "Thanks, Mom. My friends are waiting. I'll catch you at home." He walked away, laughing with his friends, leaving Caroline standing alone once again. The distance was no longer invisible, it was a wall. And as Ethan packed his bags for college that summer, Caroline's heart broke in silence. She folded his clothes, tucked his notebooks into boxes, and slipped a handwritten letter into the pocket of his suitcase. In it, she wrote, "My dearest Ethan, no matter how far you go, no matter how much we fight, you are my heart. I have given everything I have for you, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Please don't forget where you came from. Please don't forget me. Love, Mom." She prayed he would read it. She prayed he would remember. But deep down, a storm was already brewing, one that would shatter her in ways she never imagined. Knife of betrayal. The summer air was heavy with the smell of cut grass and rain-soaked asphalt when Ethan left for college. Caroline drove him to the university, her old Toyota groaning under the weight of his boxers. She had worked double shifts for months to buy him everything on the dorm list: sheets, towels, textbooks, even a brand new laptop he had begged for. He barely thanked her. At the dorm entrance, Ethan hugged her quickly, his eyes darting toward his new friends already joking on the steps. "You don't need to walk me in, Mom," he muttered. "It's fine." Caroline forced a smile, though her chest ached. "I just want to see your room. It's not a big deal. I'll call you later." "Okay." He didn't. Weeks turned into months. Ethan rarely came home. His calls were short, rushed, filled with background noise of parties. Caroline clung to every word, but when she hung up, the silence of the little house seemed louder than ever. She began mailing him care packages, cookies, socks, little notes tucked between textbooks. Sometimes he sent a quick thanks by text. Other times, there was no reply at all. Caroline told herself it was normal. He's busy. He's making a life for himself. But late at night, when she passed his empty room, she whispered prayers into the darkness. Please God, don't let him forget me. 2 years later, the betrayal began. Caroline came home from the diner one evening to find an envelope on her porch. It was from the First National Bank. Confused, she opened it and prosed it was a notice, a warning. Her mortgage had been refinanced without her knowledge. And worse, the house was in danger of foreclosure. Her heart raced. She read the letter over and over, trying to make sense of it. She had never signed anything. She had never touched her mortgage since the day she paid it off in full after 20 years of sweat and sacrifice. How could this be? Her hands shook as she dialed the number on the letter. The voice on the other end explained calmly, coldly, "Yes, Mrs. Reed, the documents were signed electronically by your son, Ethan Reed. He used your property as collateral for a loan." The phone slipped from her hand, clattering to the floor. Ethan. Ethan. The boy she had starved for. The boy she had worked double shifts for. The boy she had given her entire life to. He had mortgaged her house, her only security, her only legacy for strangers she had never met. When Ethan finally came home that weekend, Caroline was waiting at the kitchen table. The foreclosure notice lay spread before her, the ink smudged with her tears. He walked in casually, tossing his keys on the counter. "Hey Mom, what's for dinner?" She looked up at him, her voice trembling. "Ethan, what did you do?" His smile faltered. "What do you mean?" She pushed the papers toward him, her hands shaking. "The bank called. You mortgaged this house. Without telling me. Without asking me." Ethan glanced at the papers, then leaned back, crossing his arms. "It's not a big deal, Mom. It's just temporary. I needed startup money. These guys, these investors, they're helping me build something real. I'm not going to be stuck living paycheck to paycheck like you." Her chest tightened. "You put my house on the line. Ethan, this house is all we have. It's everything I worked for. How could you?" "God, Mom, stop being so dramatic." His voice rose, sharp and cold. "You don't get it. This is how success works. You take risks. You wouldn't understand because you've spent your whole life cleaning tables and serving coffee." The words cut her deeper than any blade. Caroline stood, her chair scraping against the floor. Tears blurred her vision. "Everything I did for you. Every meal I skipped, every hour I worked until my body broke, I gave it all so you could have a future. And this is how you repay me. By gambling away the roof over my head." Ethan's jaw tightened. His eyes, once so full of boyish warmth, were cold. "I didn't ask you to do all that. You chose that life. Don't put it on me." Caroline staggered back, her hand covering her mouth. It felt like the ground had collapsed beneath her. She whispered, barely able to breathe. "You're my son." His face hardened. "And you're holding me back." The silence that followed was deafening. That night, after Ethan stormed out to meet his so-called business partners, Caroline sat alone at the kitchen table, the foreclosure notice clutched in her hand. She stared at the walls of the house, peeling paint, the old photographs of birthdays and Christmas mornings, and felt the weight of betrayal crush her chest. She had been betrayed before. Her husband had left, friends had turned away, strangers had judged her. But this was different. This was her son, her flesh, her blood. And his betrayal echoed louder than all the rest. Echoes louder than strangers. The sheriff's knock came. On a Tuesday morning. Caroline was just finishing her shift at the diner when her manager handed her a folded slip of paper. "Some officer left this for you," he said, his voice uneasy. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. Final notice. The house on Ashwood Lane, her home, her sanctuary, the place where she had raised Ethan through sickness and storms, was scheduled for foreclosure. She stood frozen in the middle of the diner, her apron stained with coffee, her shoes squeaking on the greasy floor. Customers stared as her vision blurred, the letters on the page swimming through her tears. The home she had fought for all her life was gone. That evening, she walked through the house slowly, touching the walls as if to memorize them. Every corner whispered with memories. Ethan's laughter, bouncing off the stairs, the sound of toy cars rolling across the floor, the creak of his bedroom door when he used to sneak into her bed after a nightmare. Now, the house felt like a coffin. She sank onto the living room floor, surrounded by family photographs. Ethan in his Little League uniform, his kindergarten graduation, his first dance. She picked up one frame. Ethan at 7, grinning wide with missing teeth, and pressed it to her chest. How did we get here, baby? She whispered into the silence. The neighbors whispered too. When the for sale sign appeared on her lawn, Mrs. Wilkins from across the street leaned over her fence, shaking her head. Such a shame, Caroline. After all these years, Caroline smiled weakly, but inside, shame burned her alive. It wasn't strangers who had ruined her, it was her own son. But how could she explain that? How could she admit that the boy she had sacrificed everything for had stripped her of the very roof over her head? At church, the whispers were worse. People offered pity in soft voices. You'll get through this, Caroline. God has a plan. She nodded, but at night, lying on a mattress in her nearly empty home, she whispered prayers. She wasn't sure God was listening to any more. When Ethan finally returned, his swagger was gone, his clothes were wrinkled, his face pale. He tried to explain, "It's not my fault, Mom. Those guys, they said it was a guaranteed investment. They promised returns. I didn't know they'd disappear with the money." Caroline stared at him, her eyes hollow. "You gambled with my home, Ethan, with our life, and you lost. I was trying to help us." He snapped, but his voice cracked. "I wanted more than this. More than scraping by." Caroline's tears spilled over. "I didn't need more. I only ever needed you. And now, I don't even have that." Ethan looked away, shame flickering across his face. But he didn't apologize. He couldn't. The day she left the house, Caroline walked slowly from room to room, her footsteps echoing against the bare floors. The movers had already taken the furniture, leaving only shadows where memories had lived. She paused in Ethan's old room. The walls were still faintly marked with stickers he'd plastered there as a child, cartoon characters, superheroes, scribbles of marker he'd once gotten in trouble for. She touched the wall, her hand trembling. "This was supposed to be yours," she whispered. "Your safe place, your inheritance. And now it's gone." Her voice cracked into a sob. She left the house with nothing but a suitcase, a box of photographs, and the ache of betrayal so deep it threatened to swallow her whole. 4 weeks, Caroline drifted. She stayed on a friend's couch, then in a cheap rented room above a laundromat. She went to work at the diner as if nothing had happened, but inside, she felt like a ghost. Customers smiled politely. Strangers treated her kindly. But every time she looked at Ethan, she saw the knife in her back. She realized something chilling. The betrayals of strangers had hurt before. Her husband's abandonment, friends who had disappeared when money was tight, the gossiping neighbors, but none of that compared to this. When your own child betrays you, the wound is different. It doesn't just cut your flesh, it slices through your very soul. And every time she heard his voice, every time she saw his face, the echo of that betrayal was louder than any pain she had ever known. One night, Caroline sat by the window of her rented room, staring at the city lights. The diner uniform still clung to her, smelling of grease and coffee. Her hands were raw, her body exhausted, but her spirit was what frightened her. For the first time in her life, she wondered if she had the strength to keep going. But then she thought of Ethan, not the man who had betrayed her, but the little boy he used to be. The boy who once said, "I'll buy you a big house one day, Mama." And she realized something. She couldn't let him destroy her. She couldn't let his betrayal define the rest of her life. Caroline wiped her tears, her jaw tightening with resolve. "You may have broken me, Ethan, but you will not end me." For the first time in months, she stood tall. The echo of betrayal was still there, but it was no longer the only sound. Beneath it, faint but growing, was something else, the sound of her own strength rising again. Redemption or ruin. The call came late on a Friday night. Caroline was scrubbing down the counter at the diner, her back aching, when her phone buzzed. The name on the screen made her chest tighten in it. She hesitated, her hands trembling. For weeks, their conversations had been nothing but silence, accusations, or excuses. Part of her wanted to ignore it, but a mother's heart, no matter how wounded, never fully closes its door. She answered. "Hello." His voice cracked on the other end. "Mom, I need you." When she found him, he was sitting outside a rundown apartment complex, his head in his hands. The boy who once lit up every room looked broken, dark circles under his eyes, his clothes wrinkled, his shoulders hunched in defeat. He looked up at her, shame burning in his gaze. "They took everything, Mom. The guys I trusted, they scammed me. I owe money I don't have. My friends, they're gone." Caroline's throat tightened. Part of her wanted to pull him into her arms, to soothe him like she did when he was a child after a nightmare. But the memory of foreclosure notices, of empty rooms, of her broken heart held her back. She stayed standing. I warned you, Ethan. I begged you to be careful. But you wouldn't listen. His voice cracked. I know, and I was wrong. I was stupid. I thought I could be more than this, more than what we had. I didn't realize I already had enough. Silence hung heavy between them. Caroline finally spoke, her voice trembling with both rage and grief. Do you have any idea what you did to me? That house wasn't just wood and nails, Ethan. It was my life, my blood, every shift, every dollar, every sacrifice. I put it all into that home for you, and you threw it away for strangers. Tears spilled down his face. I thought I was helping us. I thought I could make you proud. Caroline shook her head, her own tears blurring her vision. Proud, Ethan. I was proud of you the day you were born. I didn't need you to make millions. I didn't need you to build an empire. I only needed you to remember who loved you enough to give you everything she had. Her voice broke, and you forgot. Ethan collapsed to his knees, clutching her hands. I'm sorry, Mom. Please, I don't know where else to go. I need you. Caroline looked down at him, torn between love and devastation. She could walk away. She could let him drown in the mess he made, force him to face ruin. But in the silence of that moment, she heard echoes of another voice, the little boy Ethan used to be, whispering, Love you, Mama. Her heart cracked all over again. Slowly, she knelt down in front of him, lifting his chin so he would meet her eyes. Ethan, I will always be your mother. And because of that, I will always love you. But love doesn't mean forgetting. Love doesn't mean erasing what you did. If you want redemption, you're going to have to earn it. He swallowed hard. I'll do anything. Then, start by being honest. Start by taking responsibility. Start by remembering that your word, your loyalty, your blood, they mean more than money ever will. Ethan nodded through tears, gripping her hands like they were the only lifeline left. That night, they didn't go back to the house that no longer belonged to them. Instead, they walked together through the quiet city streets, for the first time in years. Ethan didn't walk ahead of her, he walked beside her. Caroline knew the road ahead would not be easy. Forgiveness was not a switch she could flip. Trust would take time, perhaps years, to rebuild. But as the first light of dawn touched the horizon, she felt something stir in her chest, something she thought she had lost forever. Not hope in Ethan, hope in herself. She had survived abandonment, poverty, and now betrayal from the person she loved most. And still, she stood. As the sun rose, Caroline whispered to herself, You may have betrayed me, Ethan, but I will not betray myself again. Epilogue. Months later, Caroline had moved into a small rented house near the diner. The walls were bare, the rooms modest, but they were hers, paid for by her hands, her work, her strength. Ethan visited often, no longer with excuses or arrogance, but with quiet effort. He helped her paint the walls, cooked dinner once in a while, and most importantly, he listened. Redemption was not instant, but it had begun. Because even though betrayal echoed louder than strangers, love, when tempered by truth and boundaries, could still whisper louder than regret. And Caroline, scarred but unbroken, finally knew she was more than what she lost. She was a mother who had endured the deepest cut and survived.